A woman who attracts the best men is never the one chasing, pleading, or compromising herself just to be chosen. She doesn't settle for breadcrumbs of affection. And she doesn't justify poor treatment under the illusion that love requires endless sacrifice. Instead, she moves through life with an unshakable awareness of her worth. And that changes everything. Because let's get one thing straight. Men, especially high-quality men, are drawn to confidence like a magnet. Not arrogance, not entitlement, but quiet, steady self-assurance. The kind of energy that says, I don't need you to complete me. I am already whole. This doesn't mean she's cold or unapproachable. Quite the opposite. She's warm, engaging, and open. But she's also selective. She doesn't entertain just anyone. And that selectiveness, that discernment, is precisely what makes her stand out. But here's where most women go wrong. They think they know their worth, but the moment a man shows inconsistent interest, they start over-explaining, proving, or worse, lowering their standards. They start making excuses. Maybe he's just busy. Maybe I'm asking for too much. Maybe if I show him I'm patient, he'll appreciate me more. No! What he will appreciate is a woman who respects herself enough to walk away from mixed signals. Because the second you start justifying why a man isn't showing up fully, you're already operating from a place of lack. A woman who knows her worth doesn't beg for effort. She doesn't cling to potential. She doesn't stay in situations that drain her energy. And let's be real, this isn't just about men. This is about the kind of woman she chooses to be in every aspect of her life. When she walks into a room, she commands attention, not because she's the loudest, not because she's trying the hardest, but because she carries herself with a presence that says, I belong here. And men notice. The best men, the ones who are confident, emotionally intelligent, and ready for something real, are drawn to women who have a deep-rooted sense of self. These men don't want to rescue you. They don't want to be worshipped. They want a woman who enhances their life, not one who molds herself to fit into theirs. But let's talk about the flip side, because this is where a lot of women struggle. Knowing your worth isn't just about what you project outwardly. It's about what you believe internally. It's easy to say, I won't settle. But when you're faced with loneliness, when societal pressures creep in, when you see other women in relationships while you're still waiting for the right one, that's when the real test happens. Do you trust yourself enough to hold your standards? Do you believe you are enough, even when no one is watching? Because if you don't, it will show. It will show in the way you tolerate half-hearted efforts. It will show in the way you rationalize behavior that deep down you know isn't good enough. It will show in the way you shrink yourself just to be more likable. And that is exactly what repels the men you actually want. The good news? This isn't about playing games. It's not about manipulation. It's about alignment. When you truly know your worth, you naturally attract men who respect and value you. There's no chasing involved. There's no guessing. There's no endless overanalyzing. A man who is serious about you will move with clarity. His actions will be consistent. And if they're not, you won't waste a single second trying to convince him to see your value. Because the truth is, when a woman stands firm in who she is, she becomes undeniable. She doesn't have to demand respect. She embodies it. And the men who recognize that, they will pursue her. Not because she played some strategy, not because she withheld affection as a tactic, but because her energy alone communicates one simple, powerful message. I know I'm worthy of the best, and I will accept nothing less. There's a fundamental difference between a woman who attracts the best men and a woman who constantly finds herself in situations where she's undervalued. It's not about looks. It's not about luck. It's about energy. The way she carries herself, the way she communicates, the way she sets the tone for how she is treated. And one of the most defining characteristics of a woman who naturally attracts high-quality men, she does not tolerate inconsistency. Because let's be honest, when a man is truly interested, his actions reflect that. There's no confusion. There's no second guessing. He doesn't leave you hanging for days. One of the most powerful habits a woman can develop, the kind of habit that attracts the best men effortlessly, is this. She does not abandon herself to keep a man interested. And yet, How many times do we see women shrink themselves in relationships? How many times do we see a woman silence her opinions, compromise her boundaries, or mold herself into what she thinks a man wants just to keep him around? Let's be clear about something. Any relationship that requires you to sacrifice your identity in order to maintain it is not a relationship worth keeping. And the woman who attracts the best men, she understands this. She refuses to negotiate her self-worth for the sake of companionship. Because here's what most people don't realize. Men are drawn to a woman who is whole on her own, a woman who stands firm in her values, her interests, her passion, a woman who is deeply rooted in her own sense of self. Not because she's playing hard to get, not because she's trying to prove a point, but because she truly understands that she is enough, exactly as she is. And that kind of confidence, that's magnetic. That's what draws in high-quality men. The ones who aren't looking for someone to complete them, but someone to stand beside them. Now, let's talk about what happens when a woman abandons herself in relationships, because this is where so many people get stuck. When a woman starts making her entire world revolve around a man, when she loses sight of her own needs, her own goals, her own identity, something shifts. She stops being the woman he was initially drawn to. She becomes reactive instead of proactive. She becomes dependent instead of grounded. And over time, that energy, that loss of self, it creates distance. Because think about it. What makes someone attractive? It's not just their looks, it's their energy, their presence, the way they move through the world with a sense of purpose and confidence. When you strip that away, when you put someone else's needs above your own to the point where you start disappearing, you lose that energy. And with it, you lose the dynamic that created the attraction in the first place. The woman who attracts the best men, she does the opposite. She maintains her sense of self no matter who walks into her life. She never stops pursuing her passions, her friendships, her personal growth. She doesn't suddenly become available 24/7 just because a man shows interest. She doesn't drop everything the moment he calls because she has a life, a full, meaningful life that isn't dependent on whether or not a man is in it. And here's the thing. Men respect that. They admire a woman who knows who she is, a woman who isn't easily swayed, who isn't looking for external validation, who isn't waiting for someone to give her permission to be happy. This isn't about being difficult or unapproachable. It's about being anchored in your own worth. Because let's be honest, how many times have you seen a woman settle? How many times have you seen someone stay in a relationship that drains them just because they're afraid of being alone? And how often does that actually lead to happiness? It doesn't. It leads to resentment. It leads to exhaustion. It leads to a life that feels smaller than it's supposed to be. The woman who attracts the best men, not because she's waiting for perfection, but because she knows that the right relationship will never require her to shrink. It will never ask her to give up her dreams. It will never make her feel like she has to choose between love and self-respect. She also understands this: a man who is truly meant for her will enhance her life, not consume it. He will celebrate her independence, not resent it. He will see her strength and be drawn to it, not intimidated by it. And if a man is intimidated by her strength, if he tries to make her feel guilty for having standards, for having a voice, for having a life outside of him, that's not a man she's interested in keeping around. Because she knows that the best relationships, the ones that are built to last, are partnerships, not projects. Not power struggles, partnerships. Two people who come together not because they need each other, but because they choose each other. And that's what makes her different. She doesn't love from a place of fear. She doesn't hold on to people who don't show up for her. She doesn't sacrifice herself to make someone stay. She trusts that the right man, the best man, will want her exactly as she is. And because she believes that, she attracts it every single time. The woman who consistently attracts the best men has mastered something most people overlook. She sets the emotional tone in her relationships. She understands that the way she carries herself, the energy she brings, and the standards she upholds dictate the kind of men who enter and stay in her life. Let's break this down. Have you ever met someone who just radiates confidence? Not arrogance, not ego, but a calm, unshakable sense of self? It's in the way she speaks, the way she holds eye contact, the way she moves through the world without second-guessing herself. That energy, it's magnetic. People are drawn to it. Men are drawn to it. And it's not because she's the most conventionally attractive woman in the room. It's because she carries herself like she knows exactly who she is. But here's what's interesting. This confidence isn't just something she projects outwardly. It's internal. It's the result of years of self-respect, of choosing herself, of refusing to settle. It's built through experiences, through lessons, through every single moment she's had to remind herself, I am worthy, with or without someone else's approval. And that is exactly why she attracts the best men. Because men, high-quality men, aren't looking for someone who's desperate for their validation. They're looking for a woman who has already validated herself. A woman who isn't looking to be rescued or completed, a woman who sets the emotional tone in her own life, rather than waiting for a man to dictate it for her. And that's where most people go wrong. They give away their power in relationships without even realizing it. They wait for a man to decide if he's interested before they feel good about themselves. They overanalyze his texts, his words, his actions, constantly looking for reassurance that they're enough. And the problem? The moment you need someone else to tell you that you're worthy, you've already handed them control over your emotions. The woman who attracts the best men, she doesn't operate that way. She doesn't chase, she chooses. She doesn't wait to be picked, she decides who deserves her time. And because she carries herself with that energy, men respond to it. But let's be clear about something. This isn't about playing games. It's not about pretending to be busy when you're not. It's not about withholding affection just to create distance. That's manipulation. And the best men, they see right through it. This is about authentic self-assurance, about knowing that you are valuable, whether a man sees it or not, about refusing to overextend yourself for someone who hasn't earned a place in your life. Let's talk about how this plays out in real time. A woman who sets the emotional tone in her relationships doesn't tolerate inconsistency. If a man is interested one day and distant the next, she doesn't sit there wondering, what did I do wrong? She doesn't twist herself into knots trying to decode his behavior. She simply acknowledges, this isn't the kind of energy I accept in my life, and she moves accordingly. If a man tries to test her boundaries, she doesn't bend them just to keep him around. She communicates clearly, with kindness but firmness, because she knows that the right man won't push back against her standards. He'll respect them. And most importantly, she doesn't let outside circumstances dictate her worth. Whether she's single, dating, or in a committed relationship, her sense of self remains the same because she's not building her confidence on something temporary. She's building it on something unshakable, her own belief in herself. And that belief, that's what sets her apart. Now, here's the part that most people struggle with. Consistency. It's easy to be confident in theory. It's easy to say you won't tolerate mixed signals, that you won't abandon your standards. But when you really like someone, when emotions get involved, that's where people tend to waver. But the woman who attracts the best men, she stays consistent. She doesn't let attraction override her standards. She doesn't let chemistry make her forget about compatibility. She understands that how she allows herself to be treated sets the precedent for every relationship in her life. And when you operate from that place, when you embody that level of self-worth, something incredible happens. You stop attracting men who test your patience, who keep you guessing, who make you question your own value. Instead, you attract men who see you clearly, who meet you at your level, who aren't intimidated by your confidence, but inspired by it. Because here's the truth, the best men aren't looking for a woman who is waiting to be chosen. They're looking for a woman who has already chosen herself. And when you become that woman, everything changes. There's something undeniable about a woman who moves through life with a deep sense of self-trust. She doesn't second-guess her decisions, she doesn't apologize for her boundaries, and she certainly doesn't rely on external validation to know her worth. And this is exactly why the best men are drawn to her. Because here's the truth, confidence isn't just about how you look, how you speak, or how you carry yourself. Confidence is consistency. It's showing up as the same person in every situation. It's knowing who you are and refusing to bend that just to make someone else comfortable. And that's rare. Most people adapt to their surroundings. They shift their personality based on who they're talking to. They make themselves smaller, more agreeable, more palatable, because deep down, they're afraid that if they don't, they won't be liked. But the woman who attracts the best men, she doesn't play that game. She doesn't walk into a room looking for approval. She walks in knowing that she already belongs. And that energy, it's magnetic. Because think about it. What is more attractive than someone who is fully, unapologetically themselves? Someone who doesn't need to be the loudest person in the room to be noticed, but who owns their space with quiet certainty. That's power. That's presence. And men, especially high-quality men, feel it immediately. But here's where most women struggle. They overthink everything. They analyze every interaction, every text, every subtle shift in energy. They question whether they said the right thing, whether they should have been more this or less that. And in doing so, they give away their power. They let doubt creep in where confidence should be. The woman who consistently attracts the best men doesn't overthink her every move. She trusts herself. She trusts that if a man is truly interested, she won't have to guess. She trusts that if someone pulls away, it's not her job to chase, to convince, to prove her worth. She understands that the right person will never require her to abandon herself just to keep them. And that's the difference, because the moment you start questioning your own instincts, the moment you start making decisions from a place of insecurity instead of confidence, you shift the entire dynamic. You start playing defense instead of offense. You start reacting instead of leading. And when you do that, you lose the one thing that makes you truly magnetic: your authenticity. The best men are drawn to women who know exactly who they are. Women who don't dilute their personality just to be more likable. Women who would rather walk away than settle for something that doesn't feel right. Because here's the truth that most people don't want to hear. The moment you stop trying to be what you think a man wants and start being exactly who you are, the right men will notice. The ones who can't handle your confidence, they'll fall away. The ones who need you to shrink so they can feel bigger, they'll disappear. And that's exactly what you want, because the men who are intimidated by your self-assurance were never meant for you in the first place. The best men who are strong, secure, emotionally intelligent, they don't want a woman who second guesses herself. They don't want a woman who is constantly seeking reassurance that she's enough. They want a woman who knows she is. And that kind of confidence doesn't come from playing game. It doesn't come from pretending to be someone you're not. It comes from trusting yourself, from making decisions that align with your values, from refusing to let fear of rejection make you compromise what you truly want. It's easy to say, I know my worth, but it's much harder to act like it. It's harder to walk away from someone you have feelings for because they aren't treating you right. It's harder to sit in the discomfort of uncertainty rather than grasping for control. It's harder to believe that what's meant for you won't require you to chase it. But that's what separates the women who attract the best men from the ones who settle. Because the best men, they aren't looking for someone who needs them to feel complete. They're looking for someone who is already whole. Someone who brings something real to the table, not just a polished version of what they think a man wants. So if you want to attract the kind of man who respects you, who values you, who meets you at your level, stop second-guessing yourself. Stop overanalyzing every interaction. Stop making decisions from a place of fear instead of self-assurance. Trust yourself, speak your truth, own your space, because when you do, the right man will not only notice, he'll pursue you. There's something about a woman who values her peace over fleeting attention. A woman who isn't easily shaken by the noise of the world, who doesn't react impulsively to every little disruption, but instead holds herself with a quiet strength. That's the kind of woman who attracts the best men, not because she plays games, but because she understands the power of emotional discipline. And that's rare. Most people are walking around reacting. They react to the way someone speaks to them. They react to the way someone texts or doesn't text. They react to the smallest change in someone's tone, in their energy, in their interest level. And before they even realize it, they're caught in a cycle of chasing, proving, over-explaining, trying to fix something that was never fully theirs to begin with. But the woman who attracts the highest quality men, she moves differently because she understands something that most don't. True power isn't about control, it's about restraint. She doesn't let someone else's inconsistency pull her out of her own alignment. She doesn't make impulsive decisions based on temporary emotions. She doesn't feel the need to prove her worth the moment she senses someone pulling away. Instead, she takes a step back. She evaluates, she watches, and most importantly, she chooses how she responds. And that makes all the difference. Because the men who are truly worth your time, the men who are strong, secure, and emotionally mature, are not attracted to chaos. They're not drawn to drama. They don't fall for the woman who is always caught up in emotional highs and lows, constantly looking for reassurance, constantly needing to be chased. No, they are drawn to the woman who is steady, the woman who doesn't react emotionally, but responds intentionally, the woman who knows that if something is truly meant for her, she won't have to fight for it, force it, or manipulate it into existence. And that's what sets her apart. Because here's the truth. How you handle uncertainty determines the kind of men you attract. If you panic the moment things don't go your way, if you start questioning your worth the second someone pulls back, if you let your emotions dictate your actions without pausing to think, then you will always find yourself in situations where you feel powerless. But the moment you start mastering your emotions instead of being controlled by them, everything shifts. Because emotional discipline isn't about suppressing how you feel. It's about understanding that not everything deserves a reaction. It's about recognizing that your worth is not up for debate, no matter how someone else is behaving. It's about knowing that if someone is creating confusion in your life, the solution is not to fight harder for their attention. It's to step back and reassess whether they even deserve your presence. That's what the best men notice. They see the way you carry yourself in difficult moments. They watch how you respond to uncertainty, to distance, to change. And what they're looking for, what sets you apart, is grace under pressure. Because here's the thing. Relationships are not about perfection. No one gets everything right all the time. But the difference between the women who attract great men and the ones who struggle, it's in how they handle the moments that don't go as planned. When a man sees that you are not easily shaken, when he sees that you trust yourself enough to pause instead of react, when he realizes that you will never beg for what is already meant for you, he will respect you in a way that most women never experience. And that respect, that's the foundation of attraction. That's what separates a temporary spark from deep, lasting connection. So here's the takeaway. Your emotions are powerful, but you are the one in control. Not everything requires a response. Not everything deserves your energy. When you start leading with emotional discipline, when you stop reacting to temporary feelings and start making choices based on long-term self-respect, you don't just attract better men, you attract a better life. There's a certain kind of woman that the best men simply cannot ignore. Not because she's the loudest in the room, not because she's the most physically striking, but because she carries herself with an undeniable sense of self-respect. And self-respect, that's rare. It's rare because too many people are willing to negotiate their standards. They're willing to accept less than they truly deserve, hoping that with enough patience, enough love, enough convincing, they can make someone treat them better. But the woman who consistently attracts the highest quality men, she doesn't wait for someone to see her value. She knows her value. And because she knows it, she makes sure the world treats her accordingly. She has non-negotiables. Now let's talk about that for a second. Because a lot of people misunderstand this concept. They think having non-negotiables means having a long, rigid list of expectations, that it's about being demanding, being difficult, being impossible to please. But that's not it at all. It's about clarity. The best men, the men who are truly confident, emotionally mature, and secure, are not looking for a woman who bends at the first sign of discomfort. They are drawn to the woman who knows exactly what she will and will not accept. The woman who is clear on her standards and holds herself accountable to them. Why? Because clarity is strength. A woman who is clear on her non-negotiables is a woman who isn't seeking validation. She's not desperately hoping someone chooses her. She's not afraid to walk away if something doesn't align. And that unwavering self-respect is what makes the right men pursue her with intent. Because here's the thing, if you don't set your standards, life will set them for you. If you don't define what is and isn't acceptable, you will always find yourself in situations where you are compromising on things that truly matter to you. And the men who aren't serious, the men who are inconsistent, emotionally unavailable, or just looking for a casual, convenient connection, they thrive in the space where a woman is unsure of her own boundaries. But when you are clear, when you move with certainty about what you will and will not allow, those men won't even make it past the front door. So what does this actually look like? It means you don't entertain mixed signals. You don't sit around analyzing someone's lack of effort. You don't justify disrespect, inconsistency, or half-hearted commitment. You don't waste time trying to turn potential into reality, because you know that the right man for you won't require constant convincing. The right man will rise to the standard you set, not because you demand it, but because he respects you enough to meet it. And let's be clear, this isn't about arrogance. It's not about walking around with an attitude of superiority, like no one is good enough for you. It's about self-awareness. It's about knowing that the relationship you allow is a direct reflection of what you believe you deserve. And the second you start lowering that standard just to keep someone interested, you send a message not to them, but to yourself, that your worth is negotiable. But the moment you decide that it isn't, that your peace, your happiness, your emotional well-being are not up for debate, everything changes. Because men, especially the best men, can feel that energy. They can feel the difference between a woman who is desperately trying to prove her worth and a woman who already knows it. And here's the most important part. When you operate from this place of clarity, you don't just attract better men, you attract better outcomes in every area of your life. Because when you stop settling for less than you deserve, you create space for what is meant for you. You stop chasing, stop explaining, stop trying to convince people to see your value, and instead you embody it. And that is what makes all the difference. So if you want to attract the best men, it starts with you. It starts with deciding right now that your standards are not up for negotiation, that your worth is not something you will debate with anyone. Because the moment you set that boundary, you will never have to chase a great man. He will recognize you instantly, and he will step up to meet you. There's a truth that confident, self-assured women understand, one that sets them apart, not just in relationships, but in life. They know that the most powerful position they can hold is choice, not desperation, not hope that someone will choose them, choice, because the second you realize that you are the prize, everything shifts. You stop overanalyzing. You stop waiting for someone to validate you. You stop bending over backward for people who haven't earned a place in your life. And most importantly, you stop tolerating relationships that require you to shrink yourself just to keep them going. The best women, the ones who attract high-quality men effortlessly, carry themselves with a level of certainty that is undeniable. They don't need a relationship to feel complete. They don't need attention to feel valuable. They already know their worth. And because they know it, they are highly selective about who gets access to their time, their energy, their heart. It's not about arrogance. It's not about entitlement. It's about understanding that not everyone deserves a seat at your table. Because let's be honest, how many times do we see people settle? How many times do we see someone force a relationship, not because it's healthy, not because it's fulfilling, but because they're afraid of being alone? Let me tell you something. Being alone is not the worst thing. The worst thing is losing yourself in a relationship that doesn't honor you. The worst thing is compromising so much that you wake up one day and don't even recognize who you are anymore. A woman who attracts the best men understands this deeply. She would rather wait for the right man than waste her time with the wrong one. She has the patience to hold out for what aligns with her values, her vision, her peace of mind. And because of that, she commands respect without ever having to ask for it. Because men, especially the best men, can sense when a woman is whole on her own. They can feel when she isn't seeking validation, when she isn't looking for someone to complete her, but rather someone who complements the life she has already built. And that's what makes her irresistible. Because she's not giving off the energy of need, she's giving off the energy of abundance. She's not afraid to walk away from something that doesn't serve her. She's not afraid to say no when something doesn't align. She doesn't fear losing a man because she understands that a relationship should never be built on fear in the first place. She chooses from a place of power, not scarcity. And that's exactly why the right men chase her. Because when a man meets a woman who isn't desperate for his attention, who isn't afraid to live fully whether he's in the picture or not, it makes him step up. It makes him want to earn his place in her life. Because real men, they love a challenge. Not a challenge in the sense of games or playing hard to get, but a challenge in the sense that they want to win a woman who holds herself to a high standard. They want to be with a woman who makes them better. And the kind of woman who does that, she isn't waiting around hoping to be chosen. She is choosing. She is moving through life with clarity, confidence, and purpose. She is investing in herself, prioritizing her peace, and refusing to settle for anything that does not add value to her life. And that right there is what makes her magnetic. Not just to men, but to opportunities, to success, to everything good that life has to offer. Because when you stop chasing, when you stop settling, when you start knowing without a doubt that you are the prize, you shift everything. So if you want to attract the best men, if you want to build the kind of relationship that is actually worthy of you, start by becoming the kind of woman who doesn't settle for less, and watch how the world and the men in it rise to meet you.